The air in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, August 23, 2025, was thick with more than just the late summer humidity. It was heavy with tension. Throngs had descended on the Capitol, voices rising between marble monuments. The demonstration began peacefully near the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Families, students, veterans, holding signs that told stories of economic hardship and political frustration. They marched with a shared purpose, to be heard by the leaders just a short distance away. As the afternoon sun beat down, the demonstration snaked its way through the city's streets toward Lafayette Square, directly across from the White House. The mood was a complex mix of hope and anger. For every chant calling for unity, there was another demanding radical change. The diversity of the crowd was striking, representing a broad cross-section of American society. Yet they were bound by a common thread of disillusionment. The demonstration on that Saturday did not materialize out of thin air. It was the culmination of months of growing public discontent fueled by a perfect storm of economic and social pressures. The primary catalyst was the Prosperity Act, a sweeping piece of economic legislation passed in the spring of 2025. The government had promoted it as a necessary measure to stabilize the economy, but for millions of Americans, its effects were devastating. The act included deep cuts to social safety nets, a rollback of environmental regulations to spur corporate growth tax reforms that overwhelmingly favored corporations and the wealthiest citizens. The promise was that prosperity would trickle down. But for many, the reality was a sudden and harsh drop in their standard of living. For the people who gathered in Washington, this was not an abstract political debate. It was deeply personal. They were teachers, factory workers, young families. Grassroots organizations, labor unions, student groups used social media to mobilize thousands nationwide. Their message was simple: the American dream was dying. They came to D.C. to demand a government responsive to its people. As night fell over Lafayette Square, the atmosphere grew more intense. A small group of protesters broke away from the main crowd. Close-ups, masked faces, and bandanas. They formed a tight circle. In the center, one person held a folded American flag. For a moment, a hush fell. Ambient noise receded. The flag was unfurled under harsh streetlights. Stars and stripes glinted. Blue and red police lights flashed. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned political theater for viral impact. The reasons they chose this act were complex, deeply rooted in their feelings of alienation, corporate greed, systemic injustice, a government waging wars abroad while neglecting people at home. Burning the flag was their way of rejecting that version of America. It was visceral, shocking, a statement of disillusionment. Dozens of phones captured it. Live streams spread it across social media. It shifted the story from policy protest into a flashpoint in the culture war. The protesters expected this. They chose divisiveness to dominate the news cycle. The fire was small, quickly contained, yet its symbolic power was immense. The moment the flames licked the edges of the first flag, the posture of the police force changed instantly and dramatically. Restrained lines of officers starting to move, coordinated, almost mechanical advance. The mission changed from monitoring to quelling a riot. Officers don gas masks. An imposing, faceless wall advances. The air filled with the sharp, authoritative crackle of police radios and bullhorn dispersal orders. This sudden advance created a surge of panic and confusion. Many who had been peacefully demonstrating were caught off guard, pressed between the advancing police line and the dense crowd behind them. The square transformed into a chaotic, claustrophobic pressure cooker. The air grew thick with smoke from smoldering flags, and from the smoke canisters, police began to deploy, billowing an acrid haze that obscured vision and heightened disorientation. Some protesters threw plastic water bottles and sign poles. Scuffles broke out along the police line. The police responded with targeted force, batons, pepper spray, and flash grenades that echoed off government buildings. The loud bangs added to the terrifying cacophony. Formations moved to flank and corral, effectively cutting off escape routes, a controversial strategy known as kettling. Once the crowd was fragmented and largely dispersed, the phase of mass arrests began in earnest. The police systematically moved through the remaining pockets of protesters, singling out individuals for arrest. The criteria for arrest seemed broad. Some were clearly targeted for acts like flag burning. The process was swift and efficient. Officers secured individuals with zip-tie handcuffs and led them to waiting police vans. Buses were staged on the surrounding streets as the operation unfolded under news cameras. The numbers reported by the DC Metropolitan Police Department were staggering. A total of 287 people were arrested. Charges ranged from failure to obey a police order and disorderly conduct to more serious felony charges for assault on an officer and destruction of property. Journalists captured footage of young students being led away in tears, faces streaked with pepper spray. They filmed older protesters who had been chanting peacefully hours earlier, being forcefully detained. The sheer scale overwhelmed central booking facilities, leading to long processing times and frantic calls from families. Volunteer lawyers from the ACLU and other civil rights organizations descended on jails and courthouses to offer pro bono assistance. They began challenging the legality of mass dispersals and sweeps. The arrests marked the end of the physical confrontation on the streets, but the start of a long legal fight. Amidst the chaos and the headlines, the individual stories of those who were there provide a more personal and nuanced picture. Sarah, a 24-year-old graduate student from Ohio, was one of the many arrested for failing to disperse.
I came here because I feel like my future has been sold off to the highest bidder. I wasn't near the flag burning. I was singing with a group of people holding a candle. Then the police just charged. There was nowhere to go. It was terrifying.
On the other side was Officer Mark Jensen, a 15-year veteran.
Nobody wants it to come to this. We are here to protect everyone's right to speak their mind, but we also have to protect the city.
David, a 62-year-old retired steelworker, witnessed the flag burning and the police action.
Do I like seeing the flag burned? No, I don't. I served under that flag. But I understand the anger. When you feel you've been screaming into a void for years, you do something drastic.
These personal accounts highlight the deep chasm in how the events were perceived. For many, the police response was an indiscriminate crackdown. For officers, it was necessary to restore order. For observers like David, the event was a complicated and painful symptom of a much deeper national illness. The story was not a simple narrative of right versus wrong, but a complex tapestry of fear, anger, duty, and debate. The act of burning the American flag as a form of protest is not new. It has a long and contentious history tied to turbulent social upheavals, gaining prominence during the Vietnam War. The act shocked many and led to calls for laws to protect the flag. Many states passed flag desecration statutes and protesters were arrested. The issue reached the Supreme Court in Texas v. Johnson, 1989. A protester burned a flag outside the Republican National Convention and was convicted under state law. The Supreme Court, in a narrow 5-4 decision, overturned his conviction. Justice Brennan wrote that flag burning, as offensive as it is, constitutes symbolic speech protected by the First Amendment. If there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea. The ruling set a crucial precedent. The government cannot mandate respect for the flag by punishing disrespect. The decision triggered fierce public backlash and calls for an amendment. Congress passed the Flag Protection Act of 198.